66-yard touchdown. Jamar Jefferson on his way, and that's a touchdown for the Lions.
To the end zone, Diggs has it. Touchdown.
Caught by Devontae Smith for the touchdown. Darius Slay on the move to the outside. Walker's in front of him. Slay all by himself down the field.
Mahomes, run of time, escapes, goes to the end zone. It's Williams there, and he makes the grab.
Welcome in, everyone, to the Lucky Shots podcast. Welcome back in. The NFL is not going according to plan. It is not evening out. If you're in pick'em pools like I am, it's just been a rough few weeks. This week in particular, for me anyway, was absolutely awful. It seems like if you do watch and, you base your picks off things I'm saying, you just should go completely the opposite right now, because it seems like I'm just on the other side of everything. Let's hop into last week a little bit. What happened? You had Miami over Baltimore 22-10. Shocking game there on Thursday night. Lamar only had 39 rushing yards. And the Miami defense, it seemed like they just decided to throw caution to the wind and just blitz every single play. Put all this pressure on Lamar, and it worked. They got 4 sacks, 2 turnovers, got a defensive touchdown, and that Baltimore offense, Lamar Jackson, none of it looked good or in rhythm or anything like that. So just tough week for Baltimore, huge week for Miami, build a little bit of momentum going into this next week. Then you have Detroit and Pittsburgh, the first tie of the season. The Lions are no longer only defeated, still winless, but they have a tie now on their record. DeAndre Swift, one of the only bright spots of that game, had 130 rushing yards, had 33 carries. So, if there was any question of is he going to be their lead guy, 33 rush attempts would say yes, he is their guy. There was no Big Ben, so Mason Rudolph stepped in, had 242 yards, had an interception, but, as much as everybody likes to give Big Ben a hard time, say that he's, old, he's slow, he's lost his touch, all of that kind of stuff. Pittsburgh has a chance to win when he's in, and had he been in against Detroit, I don't think this even would have been close. But because he wasn't, Mason Rudolph had to step in, the offense didn't look quite the same, and it ends in a tie, 16-16. The Patriots, they look like they're for real. They beat Cleveland 45-7. Their offense had 452 total yards, averaged 7 yards per play. That's pretty significant. That's a good average to have per play. 268 passing yards, 184 rushing yards, and their defense got after Baker Mayfield and just completely halted that entire offense. They got 5 sacks, an interception, and only allowed 217 yards. It was kind of infuriating that you see Cleveland go down the field the first drive. They're running the ball, being Cleveland, drive down the field, score a touchdown, and then almost immediately, for no reason, just start throwing the ball and throwing the ball and throwing the ball. Got themselves in a hole that they just couldn't dig themselves out of because their passing offense isn't great, and it wasn't being set up by the running game, so it just was not a good game overall for Cleveland, but New England looking strong these past few weeks. Washington over Tampa Bay. If you guys remember last week, this was my lock of the week. Did not turn out that way. Somehow, Washington won 29-19. Their offense had 320 yards, but they did a good job of, limiting Brady. He only had 220 yards, threw 2 interceptions early in the game that really, let Washington get out to that big jump. And then Antonio Gibson came into the game. I wasn't too high on him going against Buffalo, but he ended up with 2 touchdowns. So a big-time contributor there for them, and a huge win for Washington. Really probably isn't going to mean much, for their season, but it is a huge win to, put a little feather in their cap. And Tampa Bay, gotta hope they can get it figured out. Losing to Washington is not good. And then Kansas City finally looked like Kansas City against the Raiders this past week. 41-14 was the final score. Mahomes finally put everything together, apparently. 406 yards, 5 touchdowns. Their defense had 2 sacks, 2 turnovers, allowed less than 300 yards. Just a really complete performance. In Kansas City, now we're in the predicament. Do we now treat Kansas City like we normally would treat Kansas City, or do we still proceed with caution because we've seen that, the whole year they haven't really done this at all? But against a Raiders team that is kind of starting to slip a little bit, I'm still going to proceed with caution, but the Chiefs show that they still have that in them, and that possibly could be what we see for the remainder of the season. So enough of last week. Let's put that in the past, and let's go ahead and hop into this week. Hopefully we can turn it around. We'll start on Thursday night. You got the Patriots versus the Falcons. Patriots, of course, they won their game 45-7 against Cleveland. Mac Jones looked really consistent. He had less than 200 yards, which, isn't great, but he had 3 touchdowns. And then you had Ramondre Stevenson on the ground. He had 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. Huge game for him. And then Kendrick Bourne and Jacoby Myers finally got involved. They both had a touchdown. And Hunter Henry looking like he's really starting to solidify himself in this offense, as he had 2 touchdowns on the day. And now New England, they're on a 4-game win streak. They beat the Jets, they beat the Chargers, the Panthers, and now Cleveland. They're looking just very consistent, and 45-7 is a pretty emphatic win. If Jones can continue to be consistent and this running game can continue to, build on what they've been doing, I think they're going to be a dark horse for the rest of the year. And going up against Atlanta, who, they are just short on talent anyway. But they lost 43-3 against Dallas. They had 3 turnovers, only 214 yards. But again, they're limited player-wise. And now Cordero Patterson, one of their biggest playmakers, has an ankle sprain, and it's not looking probable for him to, be ready by Thursday. But he was limited in practice on Monday, so there is still hope that he can get in, and have an impact for this offense at least. But if you look at the Falcons, they're 3-3 in their last 6 games, and their wins, pretty weak wins against the Jets, against the Dolphins, and against New Orleans, who just hasn't looked the same without Jameis Winston. And, New England's just looking very good. Atlanta's banged up. Even I think with Cordero Patterson, New England, their defense has been stellar the past few weeks over that 4-game span, and looked really good last week. Their offense is really consistent, and they have a good run game. So I'm going to go with New England in this game over Atlanta. But, dear Lord, we're going to give all our picks and plug our nose and just hope it works this week. Hopping into Sunday morning, you have Baltimore against Chicago. Baltimore obviously coming off of that shocking loss to Miami, 22-10. Lamar Jackson had 238 passing yards, but only 39 rushing yards. Threw an interception. Just wasn't a good game for this offense. They gave up 4 sacks, had 2 turnovers. They didn't force any turnovers, so it was just a tough game for them. But hopefully going against Chicago, it can be a bounce back, because they're 4-2 in their last 6. So they've won over Denver, Indianapolis, the Chargers, and Minnesota, and their 2 losses to Cincinnati, who at that time looked really hot, and against Miami, who they're not great, but they're playing decent enough football, and Tua is giving them a bit of a charge. And then Chicago, they're coming off of a bye. Their last game, they lost 29-27 against Pittsburgh, where Justin Fields actually looked really good. He had 291 pass yards, 45 rush yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Darnell Mooney had 2 touchdowns. Very close game against Pittsburgh. Really gave them a run for their money, and they had a chance. And Justin Fields, again, over the past few weeks, has actually started looking pretty good despite everything going on in Chicago. But now, Chicago, they're on a 4-game losing streak. They lost to Green Bay, Tampa Bay, San Francisco, and Pittsburgh. Is this the week that they turn it around? You know, they might be able to catch Baltimore, on this little bit of a down over the past few weeks, but I just think there's too much for Baltimore for them to lose again this week to Chicago. Justin Fields could go out and have his complete best game of the season. Their defense could go out and shut down Lamar like Miami did. But hopefully, Baltimore can game plan for if they're just going to, bum rush us the entire game, we've got a game plan for it now. So I think Baltimore changes their fortunes from last week. I think they beat Chicago this week, but again, Chicago could possibly catch Baltimore slipping. Then you got Green Bay against Minnesota. Green Bay won 17-0 last week against Seattle. Rodgers didn't have a touchdown. He had an interception. But the big story was A.J. Dillon. He had 2 touchdowns, and with Aaron Jones going to be out possibly 1 to maybe 3 weeks, it was a good sign to see that kind of production from A.J. Dillon. And there's a good possibility, they continue to try to feed him. Their defense looked pretty good in this past game. 3 sacks, 2 turnovers, only allowed 208 yards to Russell Wilson and that Seattle offense. And they are 8-1 since week 1, and their only loss came 2 weeks ago when they didn't have Aaron Rodgers. This team, like I said, they're consistent. They don't go out and do anything flashy. They're not going to blow up the scoreboard, but they will go out. They'll control the game and they'll win. Hopefully you see more from Rodgers this week. But A.J. Dillon, I think this team's in good hands in the backfield if they decide they want to try to run the ball a healthy amount next week. Then you have Minnesota, who is coming off of a 1-possession win against the Chargers, 27-20. Kirk Cousins had 294 yards, so decent enough day, and 2 touchdowns. Dalvin Cook had a touchdown. Justin Jefferson had 143 receiving yards. And Tyler Conklin, I think he only had 3 catches, but he had 2 touchdowns. So he's really coming on as a huge weapon as well in the red zone for this team. Their defense was stellar, 2 sacks, a turnover, only allowed 250 yards, and they're 3-2 in their last 5. Their wins have come to Detroit, Carolina, and the Chargers. So the Chargers kind of really the only win that they can hang their hat on because of what we've seen from the Chargers. But their losses, they lost by 4 to Dallas and 3 to Baltimore. So every game they've been in, it's been a close game. Whether or not they win or lose has been kind of a split. But when they're against a team that is actually pretty good, they don't get the job done. So against Green Bay looking the way that they have, there's no way I can go against Green Bay in this game. But, Minnesota, they're going to make it a dogfight. It's going to be probably a 1-possession game. I'd be surprised if the Packers don't beat them by more than 1 possession. But it is Minnesota, so you gotta think it's going to be a 1-possession game. But we're going with Green Bay to win that one. Then we have the Colts versus the Bills. The Colts coming off of a win, a pretty close win actually, against Jacksonville, 23-17. Jonathan Taylor, another decent game. Well, not even decent, another good game. 116 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Offensively, they didn't have any turnovers. Defensively, they did allow 331 yards. I mean, they gave up a little bit, but the biggest difference in this game for them was they had 3 sacks, a turnover, and a blocked kick for a touchdown. Without that, Jacksonville has another sneaky shot of pulling off their second upset in 2 straight weeks. But Indy's defense, they're solid. And the team itself has been fairly consistent. Good play from Jonathan Taylor, good defense. So that makes them 4-2 in their last 6. Their wins, all of them are weak. Jacksonville, the Jets, San Francisco, who actually, I guess, looked good on Monday night, and then Houston. Their losses, by 3 points to Tennessee and by 6 to Baltimore. So again, they're another team that, sure, they're doing pretty well, but all of their wins are against not great opponents. Their losses are to teams that are actually good. They are close. So, against Buffalo, who really turned around from their loss to Jacksonville this past week, 45-17 against the Jets. The Colts are really going to have to bring everything they've got. Their defense is really going to have to be dialed in to go, shut down Josh Allen in that offense. But as I said, Buffalo won 45-17 against the Jets. So again, not a solid opponent, but that is a solid win against a not great opponent. Josh Allen, he went out, had a good day, 366 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the ground, this was the massive difference in this game. You had Devin Singletary, Matt Breida, Zach Moss, and Isaiah McKenzie all have a rushing touchdown this past week. And then Stephon Diggs, he got himself very involved. 8 catches, 162 yards, and a touchdown. So the offense was really just clicking on all cylinders last week. And, I mean, what do you see now? I mean, Breida had 2 touchdowns. Had a receiving touchdown as well. So who do you look to in that backfield? Who knows? Could just continue to be a massive committee, along with Josh Allen running the football. But Buffalo is 4-2 in their last 6. Their losses, Tennessee, which Tennessee's just been one of the hottest teams in the league, and has really made themselves the best team in the AFC. And then their loss by 3 to Jacksonville. So, I mean, as much as Indy's looked great and as good as Jonathan Taylor has looked, Buffalo does have a top 2 defense against the run. So I got to go with Buffalo in this one, but there is a good chance that Indy could go in, make it competitive, and possibly pull out a win there. Then we have Detroit versus Cleveland. You got Detroit, who had that tie against Pittsburgh, which all power to them. If you can't at least win the game, go ahead and tie it. But again, DeAndre Swift, he had a huge game. 33 carries. That is a workload that we haven't seen him have yet in his career in Detroit, and that equated to 130 rushing yards. So he had a great game. And something kind of, to pay attention to, Amon-Ra St. Brown actually had a really good game. 4 catches, 61 yards, averaged 15 yards a catch. Detroit hasn't had a receiver step up and really help out this offense yet. It's been mostly TJ Hawkinson, mostly DeAndre Swift. If Amon-Ra St. Brown can go out and, continually be a good target for Jared Goff, this offense can finally actually start moving the ball and open up their offense a little bit to not just be centered around 2 players. And again, they've had a lot of close games this season. The Rams by 9, which seems like that's not close, but being a winless Detroit Lions team against a Rams team that has looked very stellar for this season, 9 points isn't a lot. And then you had their loss to Minnesota by 2, their loss to Baltimore by 2, and their loss to San Francisco by 8. So, even that game was within striking distance for them. So I've been saying it for a while. They're right on the verge of finally winning a game. very close last week, and now they're going into Cleveland. Cleveland lost 45-7 against the Patriots. Mayfield looked atrocious, but this defense got after him. Mayfield only had 73 yards, threw a touchdown, but also had an interception. Dearness Johnson went out and just did what he was supposed to do. He had 99 rushing yards, 7 catches for 58. If he had been more involved in this game, I think Cleveland could have gone out and gotten the win, but they decided to try to throw the ball a bunch, and just nothing came out of it. And again, they gave up 5 sacks and a turnover. They will have, well, more than likely will have Nick Chubb back this week. He was out last week because of COVID, so there shouldn't be any reason he's not in, which could give their offense a much-needed boost. And, you'll have him, you'll have Dearness Johnson. I still believe there won't be Kareem Hunt, but hopefully those two are enough to really just keep this offense going, because Baker hasn't looked great. They honestly just need to let him sit and recover, and, maybe Case Keenum can make something happen. He played decent against Denver, so who knows where that's going to go. But, I mean, this game is tough. I'm going to go ahead and pick Cleveland just because of their running game and Nick Chubb coming back. But this is one that I really am not confident in. I think Detroit could go in and make something happen. And if their offense can continue to build off of last week, DeAndre Swift getting very involved, Amon-Ra St. Brown being involved, I think they could have a chance to upset Cleveland this week. But the official pick, we're going to go with Cleveland. Then we have Washington against Carolina. Washington had that big upset, 29-19 over Tampa Bay. Heineke looked good. He had 256 yards and a touchdown. Gibson as well had 2 touchdowns. But big news, they lose Chase Young. Torn ACL, I believe, is what it is. So he's going to probably be out the rest of the season. And they are also unlikely to get Ryan Fitzpatrick back. So what they are right now is what it's going to be. So can you trust this offense to go out and continue to win and continue to, kind of do what they did last week against Carolina? Chase Young, that's a huge hit, but their defense hasn't been playing well all season. So we can just probably expect more of the same defensively from them. But huge win for them. And going in against Carolina, I mean, it's going to be kind of a tough game, which is weird to say. But Carolina, they won 34-10 against Arizona last week. Arizona obviously didn't have Kyler Murray and lost Colt McCoy during the span of that game. But the addition of Cam Newton apparently was enough to fire this team up and have them play well. Newton had 2 touchdowns, one on the ground and one through the air, and it's looking like he's going to be the starter next week. And, you might as well, because he came in and immediately scored a couple touchdowns and helped your team, pull off an upset against a very good Arizona team. McCaffrey was very, very involved. 95 rushing yards, 10 receptions for 66 yards through the air. No touchdowns, though. 2 straight weeks for him with no touchdowns. But, I think this week he probably ends up getting in the end zone once, maybe even twice. Defensively, they only gave up 169 yards. They had 4 sacks, 2 turnovers. But again, they didn't have Kyler. They lost Colt McCoy. So they were on like a 3rd-string quarterback. It was just not a great game for Arizona. They also didn't have D-Hop. So a lot of things going against them. So hopefully they can turn it around. But, this is another toss-up game. I'm going to have to go with Carolina, I think. The addition of Cam Newton apparently was the shot in the arm this team needed. And, he came out and looked good and played well last week. So I'm going to have to go with Carolina for that one. Then we have Houston versus Tennessee. Not really a lot to say about Houston. They had a bye last week. Their last game was a loss to Miami, 17-9. 32nd ranked offense, 30th ranked defense. That's really it. The only standout player has been Brandon Cooks. Tyrod Taylor's not making any sort of difference to this team. They don't have Mark Ingram, who was, I guess you could say, their lead back, as he now plays for the Saints. But yeah, not much to say about Houston there. So we're just going to move on to their opponent, who's red hot, the Tennessee Titans. The Titans won 23-21 against New Orleans. Tannehill had 2 touchdowns, which was good. But they didn't have Julio. He's on IR. A.J. Brown didn't play well. He had 1 catch for 16 yards. But with Julio going down on IR, they needed another guy to kind of step up for that receiving room, and Marcus Johnson actually did really well this past week. Had 100 receiving yards. So if he can continue to produce in place of Julio, and A.J. Brown can get back on track this week, this team could look very good through the air. And, running-wise, it's just kind of a big old committee now, and you don't know who's going to be the best back out of that for the week, but they're red hot, like I said. They have won 6 straight. All 3 of those have been very, very good wins. Buffalo, Kansas City, the Rams, I guess New Orleans. They had a decent record, but they also had wins against Indy and Jacksonville. So, I mean, they're just overall very impressive. And against Houston this week, I honestly see 0 way of them losing, but it has been the NFL. Have seen these stupid upsets, so it would just be par for the course now if Houston goes out and upsets Tennessee. But we're going with Tennessee for that one. Then you have San Francisco against Jacksonville. San Francisco won on Monday night, blew out the Rams. Just everything went well for San Francisco. Their defense looked fantastic. Deebo Samuel is an absolute animal and went out, had a rushing touchdown, had a big-time receiving touchdown, and Garoppolo didn't look terrible either. The defense really got after the Rams, and the Rams now looking, a little less desirable, and San Francisco trending up. So their running back core has been good. They've got, their committee as well, and that's just a huge win against the Rams. Then you have Jacksonville. They lost 23-17 against Indy. James Robinson and Jamal Agnew both had a touchdown. Dan Arnold continued to be a heavy target as he had 5 catches for 67 yards. And they actually outgained Indy in this game. So offensively, they moved the ball well. And now Jacksonville, look at them. 2-2 in the last 4 weeks. They beat Buffalo by 3. They beat Miami by 3. They only barely lost this week by less than a touchdown to Indy. And then they did lose to Seattle, which was not a good game at all, so we won't cover that one. But they're a team to kind of think about now in games where it could be a little close. I mean, if San Francisco plays the way that they did on Monday, then there's no shot. But San Francisco has been one of the more inconsistent teams this season. And Jacksonville, I would consider them to still have momentum on their side after beating the Bills, after coming so close against the Colts. I'm going to have to go with San Francisco on this game, but again, it's another game where Jacksonville could come in and have a big upset and, catch San Francisco on an off day. Game of the week right here. Just kidding. It's Miami versus the Jets. The Dolphins won against Baltimore. Huge win there, 22-10. Tua had a touchdown. He didn't even start that game, but Brissett kind of got dinged up. They brought Tua in for a little bit and just decided to keep him in, and it proved to be the right call. And defensively, they looked outstanding. They had 4 sacks, 2 turnovers, had a defensive touchdown. And that win now gives them 2 wins in a row. They beat Houston by 8, Baltimore by 12. Are they now starting to roll? Are they going to start stringing games together? I mean, a game against the Jets, definitely think they could. The Jets last week lost 45-17. Mike White, that magic is gone. He had 4 interceptions. But I don't want to say the magic's gone. Buffalo does have an extremely good defense, so it could have just been one of those weeks where, he's obviously not a starting quarterback in the NFL. He's there by happenstance. 4 interceptions against them. I don't think that's going to happen again this week, but you never know. And then you have Michael Carter, who's been playing really well. He had 82 total yards and a touchdown. Corey Davis actually had a real good game, 5 catches for 93 yards. And Elijah Moore had another touchdown. So this game could be a lot closer than people, are going to realize. A lot of people could just be all in on Miami right away after their win against Baltimore. But the Jets haven't been playing terrible football. I mean, last week, they didn't play well. They were against one of the top teams in the league. I'm going to have to go with Miami, though, in this, because I don't see a world where I ever pick the Jets. But Miami this week, coming off, they've got that momentum, and now they have even more now that it's 2 wins in a row. So I think Miami's got this one. Then to finish off the morning, we have New Orleans against Philly. New Orleans coming off their 2-point loss to Tennessee, 23-21. Simeon, he played good. 298 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, played a clean game. Mark Ingram went out there and looked like Calvin Kamara, to be honest. He had 47 rush yards, a touchdown on the ground, 4 catches for 61 yards. Huge day for him. But what really killed New Orleans in this game was they had 9 penalties, gave up 4 sacks, they had a fumble, just a lot of things that you can't do against the hottest team in the league or against any team, because that's going to make it extremely hard to win. And, it proved to cost them this past week. And now with Simeon as a starter, they're 0-2. So it's kind of tough. Simeon has been playing well, playing consistent, and playing efficient, but it just hasn't gotten the job done. They should have Kamara back next week. Are we going to see more of a 1-2 punch now with Kamara and Ingram? Kamara notoriously has been a receiving back, so maybe we start seeing the split of, Ingram on the ground and Kamara through the air. I think that would really benefit the team if that's how they went, especially since, what do they have at receivers right now? Nothing absolutely astonishing or game-changing. So then you got Philly coming off of a actually gigantic win against Denver, 30-13. Hurts had 231 yards and 2 touchdowns. Both those touchdowns went to Devontae Smith, who's having himself a great rookie year. Again, they didn't have Miles Sanders, so it was Jordan Howard who actually was that top lead back this past week. 83 yards on the ground. Boston Scott had himself a game as well with 81 rushing yards. But they could have Miles Sanders back next week. Kind of hoping they don't. I may have to play Boston Scott in fantasy this week, so if Miles Sanders is in, that's not going to really help me at all now, is it? And then if you look at Philly over the last 4 games, they're 2-2. Their wins against Detroit and Denver. Their losses to Vegas and the Chargers. So 2 wins that, aren't necessarily great. People can say a win against Denver in that fashion is super impressive, but let's be honest, Denver hasn't looked good all year. They've just had, they had 3 easy wins, and then they've stacked a couple on top of that. For this game, I'm probably going to have to go the Eagles. Their offense just looked the more complete last week, and their defense also just did a great job. In New Orleans, I still have yet to see them get it figured out with a different quarterback besides Jameis. They do have a shot because Simeon's been, being efficient with the football, so I don't think it's going to be a blowout by any means, but I think Philly pulls it off. And then to kick off our afternoon, we start with Cincinnati against Vegas. Both teams down on their own luck. You have Cincinnati, who had a bye last week, but their last game was a loss against Cleveland, 41-16. And that's 2 straight losses for them. Excuse me. In that 2-game span, Burrow only has 541 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. So, when your turnover differential is exactly even as a quarterback, that's going to be, tough to lead your team to victory. And then defensively, they've given up quite a bit. 75 total points in these 2 straight losses and 872 yards in total for those 2 games. So they're going to have to really stiffen back up on defense, get back to what, made them very good against Baltimore, which was Burrow and Chase, and then Mixon, being the back that he is. And then you have Vegas, who absolutely got smacked by Kansas City, 41-14. They gave up so much in this game. They gave up 516 total yards. They only gained 299 yards. They didn't have a run game at all. It had to all be Derek Carr. But when that happens, they gave up 2 sacks, 2 turnovers. That's their second loss in a row to Kansas City and New York, the New York Giants. And Carr, against the Giants, had 2 interceptions and just didn't look good. Against Kansas City, didn't look good. So where do we go from here for both these teams? Well, I've honestly seen more from Cincinnati that impresses me than I have for the Raiders. Derek Carr started off super hot, and there is that chance he gets back into it. But I think I'm going to have to go with Cincinnati in this one. A lot of just plug your nose and pick the games this week, and Cincinnati versus the Raiders is one of those. Moving on, we have Dallas against Kansas City. Now, this one's going to be also very tough, but not because of the 2 teams being bad. Dallas won 43-3, got back on the horse after the embarrassing loss to the Broncos. 43-3 against Atlanta. Dak had a good game, 296 yards, 2 touchdowns. Zeke had a couple touchdowns himself, 41 rushing yards, and 3 catches for 15 yards. CeeDee Lamb proving, everything that I was excited for at the beginning of the season with CeeDee Lamb is that he's their best receiver. 6 catches, 94 yards, 2 touchdowns. Defensively, they had 2 sacks, 3 turnovers, and only allowed 214 yards, and they are 7-1 since week 1. So they are on their own roll. Had it not been for Denver last week, or the week before, then they'd be on just as hot of a streak as Tennessee is. Then you have Kansas City. Again, we kind of talked about it at the beginning of the show. Do we trust this game? 41-14 against Vegas. Mahomes had 406 yards, 5 touchdowns. Darrell Williams had 144 yards, 9 receptions, and a touchdown. Kelsey had 8 catches for 119, and Tyreek Hill had 7 catches for 2 touchdowns, which, guess what? That is a Kansas City offense. That looks like what we expect every game from Kansas City. But they haven't showed that all season. So do we now all of a sudden trust it after doing it to the Raiders, who are on a skid of their own, going up against Dallas, who has just as high-powered of an offense, probably a better defense with better defenders back there. It's tough. Because if you look at Kansas City, okay, 41 points last week. But in the 2 weeks prior to that, they had a total of 16 points from both games. So, I mean, maybe they continue and build off of that momentum from last week, but I have to go with Dallas. I think it's going to be a really good game, and if the Chiefs play the way they did last week, it could make me look very stupid for not believing in them right away. But we're going with Dallas for that one. And then wrapping up the afternoon, you have Arizona versus Seattle. Arizona lost 34-10, only had 169 total yards, but James Conner found the end zone again. Defensively, they gave up quite a bit. 341 yards, 4 sacks, 2 turnovers. But, again, they didn't have Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray should be back. I know we said this last week, but 2 weeks to rehab whatever is going on, he should be back. And they are 7-1 with Kyler. They should be 8-0 with Kyler Murray. But, of course, they had that awful play against Green Bay. So I think, if they get everybody back, they're obviously not going to have Chase Edmonds back. But if they get D-Hop, if they get Kyler Murray, I think their offense continues where they left off. And this defense, they're pretty good, so they could also make some things happen. Going up against Seattle, who lost 17-0 to Green Bay, they could only muster up 208 total yards. Russell Wilson, or Rusty Wilson, whatever you want to call him, only had 161 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Definitely not the return game that Seahawks fans were hoping for. But if you look at who the leading receiver was for that game, it was actually Gerald Everett, who had 8 catches for 63 yards. Is he somebody that's going to continue to get involved? I don't know. Maybe. But going up against Arizona, who should be at next to full strength, it's going to take a special effort, I think, from Seattle to win that game. So we're going to go with Arizona for the win there. Now hopping down to Sunday night. This one honestly should be a good game as well. You got Pittsburgh versus the Chargers. Pittsburgh, they tied 16-16, but they didn't have Ben Roethlisberger. Najee Harris couldn't get anything going, only had 33 total yards, no touchdowns. If Rudolph does have to play again this week, again, he only had 242 yards, a touchdown and an interception, but this offense just doesn't run the same. It's kind of weird because, Ben isn't a star power player anymore, but the offense just is not the same without him. He had Deontay Johnson continue to be Deontay Johnson, had 7 catches, but Ray McCloud really stepped up last week. Could he be the, Juju Smith-Schuster replacement for the time being? Possibly. But we haven't seen Ben, when he's in, target McCloud really all that much at all. But Pittsburgh, before this tie, had 4 straight wins. They were on a roll of their own. They beat Denver, Seattle, Cleveland, Chicago. So they were on a bit of a hot streak themselves. Had Ben been in last week, again, I think they would have won. That would have made it 5 straight. So they're another team in the AFC that you're going to have to continue to look out for because they're putting stuff together. Then you have the Chargers, who are just an up-and-down roller coaster of a team, but they lost 27-20 against Minnesota. You had Herbert, does not look impressive yet again. He had 195 yards, a touchdown, an interception. Austin Eckler could only muster up 59 of his own and a touchdown. And their defense gave up 381 yards. Just not a good performance. And they still almost won. So, if they put everything together, they're going to be fine. But it's just the fact that they need to put everything together, and it's been a struggle for them to do that this year. They're 1-3 in their last 4. Their only win coming against Philly, which, after what Philly did last week, sure, that could be counted as impressive. But their losses have been atrocious. 24 against Dallas, 27 against the Rams, Oh, just kidding. This is the wrong one. Their losses to Baltimore, New England, and Minnesota. Baltimore's a good team. New England's looking like they're turning into a good team. And then Minnesota has been in every single game this season, so they are a respectable opponent. Who do I go with in this game? I think I got to go with the Chargers. They've got a better quarterback and more firepower, but we'll get into some of the rest of my thoughts in a bit, but I think the Chargers are going to go ahead and take this one. But Pittsburgh does have a chance. And then finishing off the week, we got Monday Night Football. It's the Giants against Tampa Bay. The Giants are coming off of a bye, and their last game was a win, 23-16 against Vegas. In that game, they had a sack, 2 turnovers, and a touchdown. Devontae Booker looked really good with 99 yards. Possibly they have Saquon back. Probably not, but that's a possibility, which could give them just one more big option for this offense. The Giants are 3-3 in their last 6. They beat New Orleans by 6, Carolina by 22, Vegas by 7. Their losses have not been all that great. Dallas by 24, the Rams by 27. They did put up a good game against the Chiefs, which honestly sure could kind of look impressive now after what the Chiefs did, but still not going to be a huge believer in the Chiefs. For Tampa Bay, they, had that upset loss, 29-19 against Washington. Brady, kind of handed the game away to begin with, and could only muster up 220 yards, which for Tom Brady, for this offense, that is not a good number. Leonard Fournette, though, he just continues to build up stats in that backfield, had 92 total yards, 8 catches. Huge game for him, just individually, though. The defense allowed 320 yards, 5 sacks. Oh, okay, so they allowed 320 yards. Yeah, they had 5 sacks. They forced a turnover. So, they still continued to get after Washington, but they just couldn't really put anything else together. And they've now lost 2 in a row to New Orleans and Washington. They had a bye in between those. So, is this a game where they can get back on track? It should be. But they've lost 2 in a row. New Orleans and Washington. Not impressive teams. And now they're going against the Giants, who are 3-3 in their last 6 and being competitive. I've got to go with Tampa Bay. It's the smart decision. But again, it's one that I'm not confident in because the Giants could go in and get an upset. And that's the way this season's been going. So let's go ahead and start wrapping up the show. We'll give you the locks of the week. So the Tennessee and Texans game, obviously I think that one's going to be a lock. I think the Titans are going to be over the Texans 28-10. Moving on, we will have the Browns over the Lions. Again, I don't know why I made this a lock. I should have made this one of the upset ones. But I think if the Browns go out and play well, stick to the game plan of running, let Nick Chubb, Dearness Johnson take care of this offense, they should be fine. But I don't see it being a shootout. I think they win 24-14. And then with the way that the 49ers played on Monday, going against the Jags, sure, that's also another trap game, upset, alert kind of game, but I think the 49ers will be over the Jags 27-17. Some toss-ups, kind of talked about those through the show, but Washington against Carolina is going to be a toss-up. New Orleans against Philly, Cincinnati versus Vegas, Dallas versus Kansas City. I think that one's going to be the game of the week, but so many toss-up games this week when all we want is normalcy from our pick'em, from our pick pool, from the NFL. We just want some sense of normalcy, but there are so many toss-ups. It's going to be hard to really navigate and get back on track, but that's what we're going to try to do this week. And then the upset alert. Pittsburgh against the Chargers. I chose the Chargers, but as up and down as they've been, as solid as the Steelers have been with Najee Harris, and then, their 4 straight wins before last week when they didn't have Big Ben, they're riding kind of a high right now. 5 weeks, not a single loss. I mean, just playing well, going out and making plays. So I think the Steelers could possibly upset the Chargers 31-28. And we'll end the show here on my picks. We'll put those right here, right now. I'm going to go with the Patriots, the Ravens, the Packers, the Bills, the Browns, the Panthers, the Titans, the 49ers, the Dolphins, the Eagles, the Bengals, the Cowboys, the Cardinals, the Chargers, and the Buccaneers. Those are going to be all my picks. Those are subject to change if, some sort of news comes out or my gut just tells me to go a different way. But these are, the smartest picks that I feel like we can make this week. So hopefully this is going to be a good week for us. We can get back to that 11-2 week where it was fantastic. I want that feeling again of, wow, that was a huge week. So hopefully this will be the pick'em sheet to get it done. And hopefully I've given you a little bit of insight to, really hopefully turn around your picks as well. But anyway, thanks for joining, guys. Join tomorrow. We'll have the fantasy show. Really dive into, what can we expect. With these games being crazy, it kind of messes with fantasy as well of who's playing well, who's not. And then join us on Friday. Friday we'll have Dylan Corbett on the show for all of the betting advice. And hopefully we can start making some better picks to start making money for that show. But anyway, I am Ricky Larson, and I thank you guys for joining. We'll see you tomorrow.